I'm going to just quickly introduce Amanda. We've got a really good session now because I think the important part of what we're talking about here is we're listening to the experts in their fields, but what are we going to do about it, both from a politics perspective, but also as business people, what are we going to do about it? So we've got a really good panel of corporate leaders, and I'm going to just introduce Amanda. Those of us that were here with her 3 years ago will remember Amanda. She brought an amazing panel from the islands, I think, I might get these wrong, but I remember it being like the Cameroon, it was Hawaii, it was Shelton from Guam, from the University of Guam. We had someone from the Solomon Islands, and it was a real sort of moment of reckoning when we hear from the people who are most at risk. If Shelton's died again, because he might be on the interweb as well with us, my boys still have that wallet and the book that was made out of banana skin, I think, that he was so passionately giving out 3 years ago. Amanda's a powerhouse. She came here 3 years ago. She was, I think then, she'd finished at the development agency in New Zealand, for the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She was working as the New Zealand ambassador to Geneva when we saw her last, and that was where she brought such a great panel. And she took a sabbatical in between writing business books on female leadership. You'll see she's published some great best-selling books on business women in leadership. She took a sabbatical in Hawaii, where Julianne Wrigley persuaded her over a period of months to come over and join her at the Global Futures Lab, the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Lab at ASU. So please welcome Amanda. She's got a great panel of speakers. We're going to have a great conversation about the role of corporate business with Ellen from HP and a few of the group as well.
Thank you, Eamon, and good morning, everybody. Aloha mai kako. Greetings in Hawaiian, where I currently reside. And Hawaii is actually a very important place globally for a number of reasons, not least because last week there was a very important announcement from Mauna Kea, which is where parts per million are measured in carbon, and we reached 421 parts per million, the highest in 4 million years. So this panel of powerhouse women is a really critical one in addressing the role of business for the world that we want. And you've heard from all of our brilliant speakers this morning that there's a real shift. When we look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, business is now the most trusted institution, ahead of government and NGOs. And this is the first time. This is a really interesting trend. Now, business also has the ability to make a real change in community. And Amy mentioned BlackRock, and many of you will have heard about Larry Fink's famous letter a couple of years ago, where he talked about the importance of stakeholder capitalism, not just shareholder capitalism. And of course, there was the Business Roundtable announcement, the Davos Manifesto, all looking at the importance of an integrated approach to business. It's not only about shareholders, it's about employees, it's about suppliers, it's about, of course, customers, and it's about the broader community. So the amazing women that you're going to hear from today are going to tell us a little bit about their companies, their own personal journeys, and then we're going to have a really interesting conversation about some of the different stakeholders that they're serving. And I did just want to refer to one line in Larry Fink's BlackRock letter this year. He said, what distinguishes truly great companies are a clear sense of purpose, consistent values, and recognizing the importance of engaging and delivering for key stakeholders. So I'm going to ask each of these incredible women to tell us a little bit about the purpose of their company and their personal purpose and how that aligns. And I'm going to just introduce them very quickly. So Florence van Dyke, another Kiwi from New Zealand, who is the co-founder of Chia Sisters, a Hillary Fellow, also a Forbes 30 Under 30 for Asia, and has just finished a Master's in Business and Climate Change at Berkeley. And beside her, the amazing Jackowski, who is the Chief Impact Officer and Head of Sustainable Impact for HP. Also a previous advisor to the Fortune 500 and currently on the faculty of the Prince of Wales Business Sustainability Program at Cambridge University. And Ellen was actually one of the first people that I heard about. June and I went hiking at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, and the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, have you seen Ellen?" I was like, "No, she's on my panel, I'm so excited." And June proceeded to sing her praises, so very excited to have Ellen on the panel today. Then next to her we have Corrie Conrad, who is the VP for Communities and Impact at Box, and also the Executive Director of Box.org. And of course, the amazing Carter Ingram, ED of the Pollination Group, who you have heard speak. So Florence, I'm going to ask you first. Tell us about the purpose behind Chia Sisters and a little bit about your personal story.
Perfect. I have a couple of slides. Can you pass the
Sure
clicker through
thing.
to me? And I will start off with an Indigenous Māori greeting. Haere, takamua, takamuri, ko wa'i whai, tēnā koutou katoa, ko whangamo, te monga, ko mahitahi te awa, ko arere te moana. Tēnei te mihi mahana ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So I just shared with you my mountain and river and ocean that I'm most connected with from my hometown in Nelson, New Zealand. And we introduced ourselves like this in Te Reo Māori because our connection to the land, the whenua, is the most important thing. It's more important than your job title, where you work. It's even more important than your name. So why am I here? I am the founder of Chia Sisters. We make functional health beverages using plant protein ingredients and indigenous ingredients in a solar-powered, zero-carbon and living wage certified factory in the top of the South Island of New Zealand. We're also the #3 ranked B Corp in the world for the environment. We export our drinks to Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong, and as of next month, the US. But more importantly than this, we've grown alongside our values. And we've also realized that we can't make positive impact on people and the planet alone. So as we grow and learn and collect data and find solutions, we've worked very hard to share this information with other companies, with our competitors, so we can lift our industry standard. My sustainability story actually starts about 15 years ago when I was in my first year of law school. And while I was there, I started hearing more and learning more about climate change. I was really eager to understand how I could have a profession that helps this issue I was learning about. So I asked at our law school in an international environmental law class where I could gather more information, but I was told that climate change wasn't part of the curriculum. And a few of me and my peers were really disappointed in this. So we founded Generation Zero, a youth-led climate change advocacy group that now has a following of 50,000 in New Zealand, and it was responsible for the first draft of New Zealand's Zero Carbon Act, which was recently enacted and sets New Zealand on the journey to become net zero carbon by 2050. Following university, I joined the dark side momentarily and became a corporate lawyer for 4 years at New Zealand's largest corporate law firm. And while I was there, I was working in a mergers and acquisitions team. I really started to understand the impact of businesses on the planet. I saw that businesses were largely responsible for a lot of the rising inequality and also for a lot of the environmental degradation. And it made me realize that if businesses are largely responsible for these issues, they also have the greatest opportunity to be part of the solution. So at the same time, I was thinking more about why I was doing what I was doing. I was thinking that I wanted to have a job that reflected my values. And with that in mind, I moved back to my hometown of Nelson, New Zealand, and I joined my sister, who is a neuroscientist and has a background in herbal medicine, and we founded Chia Sisters. So what is our why? Why do we do what we do? First up is nutrition. Our goal from the outset was to make the most nutritious beverages in the world using plant protein and indigenous ingredients. Number 2 is innovation. We're not scared to fail. We fail a lot, we fail quickly, and we innovate in our business right from the ingredients that we use to dismantling hierarchy in our team culture. And thirdly, and most importantly, is sustainability. We care about the planet that we live on, the communities that we operate in, and the people that we work with. And sustainability has been part of our business in every single step of our growth. And people often ask us, is there any point in focusing on sustainability as a small business? And the answer to this is absolutely yes. By focusing on sustainability from the outset, we've been able to grow alongside this value and make more and more impact with every stage of growth. So when we hired our first factory workers, we paid them the living wage, $25 an hour. When we started manufacturing ourselves, we lined our factory with solar panels to become New Zealand's first solar-powered beverage company. And we started measuring our carbon emissions, understanding our carbon hotspot and reducing those emissions as much as possible. Later, when we started exporting, we brought these same environmental values into our social and governance sectors to become a B Corp. And along this journey, most importantly, Amanda will be asking me a few more questions on this maybe later, but we're really focused on making these changes collaboratively because we know that the largest impact that we can make is by working together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. And one thing Florence didn't say is that she's also a fabulous triathlete. So Florence was on the New Zealand triathlon team, and that was and her dad is actually the Masters swimming champion in the world. And so her sister, Chloe, was actually helping the family, and out of that grew this incredible business. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now I'm delighted to introduce next Corrie Conrad, who's going to tell us a little bit about Box and Box.org.
Awesome.
Corrie.
Thank you so much. Is this coming through?
Yeah.
Can you hear the mic? Great, thank you. So I love actually that you shared about family and you just talked about family. So I'll do a brief just introduction of myself because I think it's nice to know where people came from and how you got to here. So in my family, I grew up with parents who were incredibly mission driven, very committed to nonprofits, spent their careers in nonprofit. My mom worked for many decades with United Cerebral Palsy. My father is a minister. So lives of service, that's how I grew up. And I figured I would go into the nonprofit space. That was very much where I intended to be and thought that would be my life's mission. And that's where I started. I led a small nonprofit when I was in college, very passionate and engaged, and kind of quickly realized that I was spending a whole lot of time fundraising. Convincing people to fund the mission and to give to it. And that's really important work. I'm still really involved with a number of nonprofits. And I thought, well, those businesses over there seem to have money. So how might I help them use some of that for greater good? And so I've really found my life's work to this point in helping companies use their strengths for greater good. And the last, I don't even know now, 15 plus years, that's where I've been. So 8 years at Google, and I met Amy Christensen, the founder of this forum, actually, when we both worked at google.org back in 2007. Learned a lot about scale at Google. Whoa, when you're thinking in terms of billions of users and customers, right? Then went to Sephora, which was a big leap. I had worked my way into engineering, program management at Google, this international studies major a French double major with a Master's of Public Affairs and International Development, discovered I had a knack for working with software engineers. Who knew? So ended up in engineering program management at Google, but jumped off that cliff to go into beauty retail. Beauty retail, why not? I led sustainability, social impact, and inclusion and diversity at Sephora, and then left that almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in September, to join Box, the Content Cloud, where I lead communities and impact in Box.org for Box. So that's a little bit about my journey. So when I think about the strengths of companies for greater good, where are they meeting needs in our communities, I kind of start like an anthropologist consultant at a company that I join. Who are we? What are we good at? What are our values? What drives us? What good is already happening that we may not fully realize that we can then, in one of the values of Box, 10x it, amplify it, grow it. And I was really thrilled to discover early on some of these areas where impact, positive community impact, was already happening, powered by the product, that we could then 10x. And those 3 themes for Box.org are environment, crisis response, and child welfare. So we can talk more about that to come. I thought it would be helpful, though, here at the outset to give a quick overview of the Box product, because it's so integral to this kind of impact-oriented and community-oriented mission that I've talked about. So the mission of Box is to power how the world works together. Welcome to the Content Cloud. What does that mean? Well, our CEO and co-founder, Aaron Levy, talks a lot about the future of work. And he'll say the future of work is here. We're all experiencing it. Digital first, ushered in, really significantly over the last 2 years, where even today we've got wonderful, folks joining us virtually for this conference. Hello, everybody. We're glad you're here. And folks here in the room, right? And so digital first, this hybrid environment, future of work is here. We want to be able to work from anywhere, on any device. We want to be able to share our slides and presentations, virtually, so they can get uploaded. We want to be able to have folks join that can't be in person. And actually, even yesterday, right, plane snafus happen, and we were able to continue the conference. And we need it to be secure. There's news every day around cyber attacks and things happening all over. We need to know that our content is secure and that we can work safely. So your organizations, your missions, your businesses, they run on content. Whether that's fundraising or volunteer onboarding or data collection in the field, that's all content. Unfortunately, that content lives in a lot of silos, right? You can think of all the different software applications you may be used to get your work done every day. It's not secure, and it's expensive, and there's no single kind of source or truth, system of record for all that content. Enter the Content Cloud with Box. So we are a super secure, single platform that integrates with all the different tools that you may use to do your work to provide you that single system of record. So IT administrators love Box for the view that it provides them, but we want our end users, the customers, the employees at these organizations to love Box too, and that's one of our values, blow our customers' minds, right? So customer first is a big orientation for us. Okay, so that's Box, and I've given you a little bit about me. I'd like for someone else to do an introduction, and then Amanda, look forward to jumping into more about the community impact of this work.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I would love now to turn to Ellen Jackowski and to tell us a little more about her current role with HP.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm really excited for this conversation. So I'm HP's Chief Impact Officer and Head of Sustainable Impact. So how do we define sustainable impact within our company? It's not just about the sustainability that we're driving for our own operations inside our own company, but it's about our entire value chain. So how are we engaging and driving impact with our suppliers? We have a $50 billion supply chain, a lot of leverage there, all the way through our channel partners, our customers, and the communities that we serve. So we're taking a very holistic approach. Within sustainable impact, we have 3 pillars: climate action, human rights, and digital equity. And so for us, it's not about looking at each of those concepts in a silo, but the integration and the opportunity and the interconnectedness between climate, human rights, and digital equity. And I think we have some really exciting, important, impactful examples of when you're looking at that interconnectedness, how can you create and scale the impact that you're driving across all of those pillars. The purpose of HP is to create technology that makes lives better for everyone everywhere. So built into the company's mission is this concept of corporate responsibility. And when our founders, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, created the company over 80 years ago, they included global citizenship as one of the top 8 corporate objectives, right next to revenue and profit. So in their founding, in the very early days, they really understood as you talked about, Florence, the responsibility of the company to society, and that continues to deepen. So the company I work for is HP. It was born out of Hewlett-Packard Company, the company that Bill and Dave founded. And so about 7 years ago, Hewlett-Packard Company separated into 2. So HP is the company I represent. We make printers, PCs, 3D printing. And one of the key elements of what we're doing right now is transforming our business from being a transactional company, selling things, selling PCs and printers, to now selling services, selling computing and printing. And in that transition from transactional to service-led company, there really is a huge integration with our sustainable impact principles and the value that we're driving. With selling services, you're creating a circular, regenerative economy where we can then control not just the products going out that we're so good at. We know how to ship product. We ship a lot of printers, a lot of PCs every single day. But with that circularity, how are we controlling getting them back, creating the reverse supply chain logistics to make us more efficient, effective, and sustainable? So we've set some of the most ambitious and comprehensive goals in the IT industry around climate action to be net zero by 2040, with a 50% absolute reduction in our carbon footprint by 2030, as well as by 2025, our first stair step of being carbon neutral in our own operations, so taking care of our own house first. Similarly, in the human rights space, leading goals, the only Fortune 100 company to create a goal for gender equity in leadership, 50-50, by 2030. And then in digital equity, to accelerate digital equity for 150 million people by 2030. So the ambitiousness of those goals, the comprehensiveness, thinking again across the whole value chain, has been very important for us to be out front and to be a leader in this space. Last week, we published our 21st annual Sustainable Impact Report. So we have a very long legacy of reporting. I know there's lots to talk about as well with the SEC and what's happening there. And we have a certain clear opinion on that as well, as a long reporter for over 2 decades now. In terms of my personal purpose and how that kind of all fits in, I'm really driven by scale. How can I, in my role and what I'm doing in my personal life as well, empower others to take action for the betterment of society, environmentally and socially. And I'm sure we'll get into more about scale, but that's really what drives me.
Fantastic. It follows right on from the 10 exit. Awesome. Thank you so much. And Carter, love to ask you a little more. We had the benefit of hearing from you earlier, which was brilliant. But in hearing your talk about regenerative economy, that's really exciting. We've grown up with this whole end-to-end, and a few years ago when Cradle to Cradle came out, everybody started, wow, perhaps there can be this different way of looking at things. So it's very exciting to hear that there's this focus in a really large company like yours. Tell us a little bit, with the work that you're doing with the Pollination group, how you see that move to regenerative economy fitting in with the mission that you have. And just to give you a data point, as a boring economist, the OECD has estimated that between $95 and $130 trillion in free ecosystem services are provided every year. So imagine if we had to pay for that. And Amy talked earlier about the fact that negative externalities are not often reflected in prices. So Carter, tell us a little more about how you're working alongside bigger companies and trying to influence that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start by telling you a little bit about Pollination and then how
Yeah.
I got there. So Pollination's a climate change investment and advisory firm and a foundation, and we are focused on catalyzing the transition to net zero. And a key way in which we do that, a major way in which we do that, is through nature and integrating nature into the suite of climate solutions and approaches that we pursue with governments, businesses, and other organizations. And we formed a joint venture with HSBC, which is called Climate Asset Management, and have raised, and our commitment was to raise about $1 billion to invest in natural capital that also delivers benefits for the climate and delivers financial returns. And I think that is, to your point, is a way of demonstrating how nature can really be integrated into these new economic models. Within Pollination Advisory, which is where I spend most of my time, we advise businesses, we advise governments, nonprofits, international institutions on ways in which they can develop and create climate change and nature-based strategies, address their natural capital risks and dependencies, and integrate that into core business outcomes. So we do a lot of work around impact measurement. We're developing a suite of tools to help companies measure and value their impacts and dependencies on nature, to integrate that into business decision making. And we also have a foundation, which is a way in which we work with communities and indigenous groups to support the just transition to climate change and to make sure that some of those groups who are highly dependent on nature for their livelihoods and for their daily needs are integrated into some of these solutions. And personally, the way I got to Pollination goes back, many people were talking about family and their early beginnings. My first engagement with trying to promote environmental outcomes was in North Carolina, where I grew up, and we had a huge forest behind our house, and it was being deforested. Every year, more and more forest, which was my playground, was being removed. And so I wrote letters to the mayor at an early age asking about deforestation. And it just wasn't an issue back then. That was a long time ago. And so fast forward, I focused on that in undergrad. I did my PhD research on the drivers of forest degradation and deforestation in Madagascar and the impacts on communities who directly depended on nature for their livelihoods, for everything from fuel wood to construction materials to medicine, and the impacts on biodiversity. And this was in a big mining zone in Madagascar. And so the value of mining versus the value of forests, were not equal at the time. And so I spent a lot of time at the Wildlife Conservation Society working with colleagues around the world to measure and value how wild places contribute to economic development, community development, and corporate outcomes. And I moved from WCS to Ernst & Young to help them advance their natural capital practices and approaches with companies. And one of the reasons I made that move is because I didn't see that businesses were really integrating the value of nature into business decisions in a way that could really transform our economies and some of the outcomes we've been talking about. And thankfully, there's now an organization called Pollination where I am now, which I think is unique in that it's really trying to straddle business, finance, nature, and climate. And so that's how I got to where I am
So exciting, and it's wonderful hearing these personal stories of motivation and then how all of you amazing women have gone out into the world and created this multiplier impact for difference. Wanted to pick up on the measurement point. My dad was an accountant, and my mum used to say, accountants know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And so your points about the difference between the value from a mine and the value from a forest, and the way in which we've been using this very old-fashioned, outmoded GDP, gross domestic product measure, which was never supposed to have gone beyond the Second World War, and here we are still measuring. So it's great to see these new systems of measuring. But Florence, I know you have a very specific story, which I love, about your accountant when you and Chloe wanted to put solar panels on the roof of the factory. Tell us a little bit about the conversation you had with the accountant and what transpired.
Yeah, that's right. So in 2018, we were measuring our carbon footprint and looking at ways to reduce that. And lining our factory with solar panels was one of the answers that we came up with. And our accountant asked us how we were going to justify that cost. And when we lined our factory with solar panels, we launched a new range of fresh pressed juice, and we named that range Bottled by the Sun to celebrate our shift to solar power. And the profits from that range are already 10, 15, probably 20 times now the cost of the solar panels. And in hindsight, the question that we should have been asking is it profitable to be ethical? And in that case, the answer was yes, because we innovated and thought outside the square. And I think that if we start thinking a bit more innovatively about how we're tackling these environmental issues, there's so many win-win situations that we can have.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. The accountant was asking the wrong question. I think it was Einstein who said the most important thing is to ask the right question. And instead of how many years will it take to amortize those solar panels, the question we should have been asking was, is it profitable to be ethical? And what a great story in terms of measuring what really matters. So Ellen, I'd love to come to you on this one.
Yeah, one of the
21
numbers
years in.
that we just reported last week was $3.5 billion. $3.5 billion in new sales due in part to our actions on sustainable impact. So we've started
Fabulous.
measuring this, right, from our enterprise RFPs. So it's only a small portion of our customer base. We don't have a measurement system yet for consumers or small, medium business. But from our enterprise customers, we knew that number was $1 billion the year before, and now it's $3.5 billion, so it's tripled.
Awesome.
And as we continue to create more metrics and measurement systems across our full customer base, again, this is just a tiny piece of what's possible. And that, I think, sends a very clear signal, kind of similar to your experience about why are we investing here? Yeah. It's not just the right thing to do, but this is the way to be profitable in the future.
Fantastic. And you're measuring what matters. Tell us a little bit about 10 Exit, which sounds such a fantastic, modern, new approach, and some of the values that are aligned with that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about scale and other values at Box that are relevant here. One of our values is make mom proud, or whomever you value most is the addendum there. But MMP, bring your blank self to work. However you want to show up that day, show up. You are welcome. You belong at Box. So, the culture, and this very much preceded me. It's what helped draw me to Box. The culture of Box is highly engaged and wanting to make a difference and wanting to try things. Be an owner is another value at Box. So own it. And so we see there a lot of individual ownership, which when we think about community impact, it's like, okay, like you own the impact of Box in thinking with a community lens for how we develop and design the product, for how we strategize and where we see the impact happening, how we grow that sector, right? So COVID, tons of customers working in COVID response around the world, powered by Box. If the mission of Box is to power how the world works together, the Box.org spin on that is to power how the world does more good together. And so it's that collaboration, it's working with our government partners, our nonprofit partners, our business partners who are customers to go deeper then in that community impact that they're making. And so one of the things I'm super proud of is that we have 4 kind of leader mindsets at Box: business, self, team, and community. And these are a part of our annual performance reviews. And so community is something that all of our Boxers, all of our employees, every year reflect on, okay, from where I sit in the company and what I do, how did I bring community impact to life? Could be sustainability, right? Could be social impact, inclusion. There's lots of different ways, but community is at the center.
Fabulous. Now, I want to ask, in this consulting role that you have, how do you work with clients? Are you working with those who are enlightened and already get it, and so they come to you, or are you seeking out those that you think should be moving along? So how does that work from a values perspective, given that you're sitting in a place where your values are really clear and you know that you want to have this multiplier impact through the consultancy work. And as you've said, it's a very unique consultancy. So tell us a little bit more about how that works.
That's a good question. I mean, I think most of the clients we seek and that seek us are aligned in what we want to achieve, or else they might go somewhere else. So, but that being said, we work with clients who are on the full spectrum of their sustainability or climate change journey. So we may work with companies and organizations who don't quite know where to start, but know that they need and want to address climate change. And it may be for a whole range of reasons. They may realize that their stakeholders, their investors, and their customers are asking for this, and they need to figure this out, or else their business is not going to be sustainable. Or it may be that they realize it's going to be more efficient for them in the long term, or that it's aligned with their mission, as you were describing, and they need help in consolidating and being more strategic, or refreshing their strategy to reflect some of the recent developments we're seeing in the world around nature-related risk, for example. So there's a huge spectrum, but I would say for the most part, we're working with clients who really see the value in addressing climate change and nature risks and sustainability more generally, wherever they are on the journey, to really sophisticated, where it might be developing new funds or new initiatives, to early stage where it may be they need to understand what their impacts and dependencies are from the beginning and then develop a strategy and a program.
Great, and I'm guessing what they all have in common is this broader understanding of stakeholder capitalism and the importance of addressing all of your stakeholders. Florence, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because I just discovered something new today. I thought I knew Florence really well, but I hadn't realized that you had been behind starting this Gen Zero initiative in New Zealand and actually getting then the first net zero carbon legislation drafted. So tell us a little bit about how working in collaboration and community can really make a difference. And I would love to hear more about New Zealand businesses for climate action, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. I deeply believe that to make impact, we need to be working collaboratively. And I think businesses are inherently competitive, but in the midst of a climate emergency and on this issue of climate change, there's just no time to be. And really, it's a positive for everyone to be working together. And the more my sister and I started thinking about this, the more we started realizing the importance of sharing our learnings with others. So in 2019, we founded Businesses for Climate Action. And we had two goals. One was to have 1,000 businesses in our hometown measuring and reducing their carbon emissions. And that goal really came from the fact that we had realized, I'm really passionate about climate change, and yet until I measured our carbon emissions, I had no idea where our carbon hotspots were. And measurement is a really important way to understand the problem and get the data for the problem that we're trying to solve. And the second part of Businesses for Climate Action, which is the most important, is to have those 1,000 businesses working together, which they are, in different industry work streams. So for example, we have food and beverage, engineers and architects, lawyers and accountants. And within these work streams, businesses are transparently sharing their data, sharing their climate solutions, trialing new solutions, coming up with innovations to solve their biggest carbon hotspots, to solve climate change for their industry. And in that way, we're really lifting the industry as a whole. And through Businesses for Climate Action, there's been so many blueprints for best business practice that have been created, not only for our hometown, but now applied across New Zealand and even in some cases globally.
So exciting. When I first heard this, I thought, oh, that's crazy. It's never going to work. And being an old-fashioned thinker, wow, co-opetition actually is a driver for change. And it's been so inspiring for me to see how many businesses have come on board with this approach. It's super exciting. So Ellen, tell us a little bit about your supply chains. you are way ahead of the game in terms of measuring. And we know now that 90% of companies have committed to net zero, which is huge since COP26. How are you helping to encourage your suppliers through such a large business to follow you or come along with you on this journey?
Sure. Well, I think, again, to your point, Florence, it's about setting targets. So not only have we set targets, but we're working with our suppliers to ensure they have targets that are aligned with ours, right? There's no way we're going to hit net zero by 2040 or the 50% absolute reduction that we've committed to by 2030 without our suppliers working together with us. And that does mean, again, thinking across the industry, back to the co-opetition and working with some of your competitors. One of the great examples we have, and this is how I know Dune so well, is around our ocean plastic portion of our supply chain. So back in 2016, we decided to change the way that we were sourcing recycled bottle plastic that we were using to make HP ink cartridges. Instead of buying that plastic off the North American recycled plastics market, we challenged ourselves to go to a different location, a much more difficult location in Haiti, where there is no municipal garbage collection, and set up a part of our supply chain there to start sourcing that recycled bottle plastic. So one, we're stopping that plastic from flowing in the ocean, so helping to stop the ocean plastic pollution problem. But then two, we're also creating livable wage jobs, consistent jobs that are there to support a community that happens to be, part of a country that is, one of the most impoverished in the Western Hemisphere. So this gets back to what I was talking about earlier with the connection between the choices you're making as a company for climate action to stop that plastic from flowing in the ocean, to create a circular economy, to use resources we already have with a lower carbon footprint. But then as well, from a human rights and a digital equity point of view, how are you impacting the communities? How are you providing opportunities with that procurement decision in your supply chain? And back to the co-opetition piece, once we had set up that part of our ocean-bound plastic supply chain, we then went to Dune and Next Wave, which was a group that she was organizing at the time, to bring the learnings that we had. What's working well about setting up this ocean-bound plastic supply chain in Haiti? What have we learned? And how can we, again, scale this? So Dell, one of our fiercest competitors, is part of Next Wave Plastics. And we came in there and very openly said, here's how we've done what we've done in Haiti. Here's where we've had challenges. Here's where we've had successes. So that Dell, IKEA, Trek Bicycles, Herman Miller, all the other companies that are part of Next Wave Plastics, also working to build ocean-bound plastic supply chain, we could all learn together. So we've learned from them, they've learned from us, and we've scaled. So not only now are we using that ocean-bound plastic in HP's ink cartridges, but now more than 300 HP products. Our PCs, our laptops, workstations, our monitors, all have a small amount of that ocean-bound plastic that we've started in Haiti. So a way to scale, again, not just in our company, but across our industry and other industries too.
So inspiring, and it's really new thinking. It's, excuse the pun, which everyone's expecting, the thinking out of the box. A great segue to you, Corrie. Tech plays a really outsized role when we look at scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions because of just the amount of energy that it takes for your kind of operation. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're addressing that and how you might be starting to think about way, not just suppliers, but your customers?
Yes. So ESG at Box, within the E, energy and climate is our focus. So I guess quick plug, we released our first ESG framework in March of this year that outlines what we have been doing and what we've done. And I'll say, as I joined, there's a lot of great work that Box was already doing. That whole be an owner, get stuff done, GSD culture, there was a lot of good work. There's opportunity for us in measurement. So we started with a materiality assessment last year, greenhouse gas emissions assessments on the radar, but in terms of on the roadmap, in terms of intention in supplier decisions, as we think about all that data, in addition to our data centers being 100% renewable energy powered, when we think about our infrastructure, we're not going to be building out all these data centers, right? Like there's others that have done that and done that well and done that more sustainably. And so we actually, Google is big behind our infrastructure on the data piece of things. And so we get to piggyback on the commitments they've made with the sustainability aims and goals of the data centers they're running so that we can leverage Google Public Cloud, and we announced that 2 years ago. So I do think the supply chain of how you're building your business, knowing what your differentiators are, and then leveraging the good work of others, which in some ways may also be considered competitors in different ways, is really important.
Wonderful. And that brings me to the work that you're doing, where you're having a really important multiplier effect on your customers. So I'm going to ask each of these incredible women to give one takeaway, one thing that they would like each of you to do. And while you're gathering your thoughts on that, I wanted to come back to the point that Ellen made about a very explicit gender equality and women in leadership focus. Can anyone tell me how many countries in the world have reached full gender equality? None? Zero, yes, what a well-educated audience. Can anyone tell me how many countries even have gender equality legislated for equal economic opportunity? And I'm looking at this rock star panel of incredible change makers here. How many countries have legislation to allow women to be economically active on the same basis as their male counterparts? I heard somebody say 60. No, it's less than 60. Four. It's 12. So we have a long way to go, and I'm just thrilled to have this incredible group of women change makers with me. So one last thing for the audience.
I would just say, I'm so impressed with what everyone's doing, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on the measurement and impact related to climate change. I think the next thing to start considering are, what are your dependencies and impacts on nature? How does that integrate into your materiality assessment, and how do you measure that and integrate that into business outcomes?
Fantastic.
I would say for our other kind of companies looking to get into this, doing good is good business. So
Love it.
Do good.
And for me, I think it really is about empowerment. If you're here, you probably have a vision that's already connected to your actions around sustainability, but how do you bring others together with you in your mission? How do you empower others?
Say work and grow your business by your values.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Thank you, everybody.